Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by Mug.News. Here we are at the Ecosystem Builder Podcast. Today I have with me Scott Resnick, the COO of Hardin Design and Development, and then former executive director at Starting Block. Scott, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I guess we'll just jump right into the questions. So my first one that I had for you, how did you first become involved in your startup community?
So my engagement with the startup community started about 13, 14 years ago. And it was when we were graduating from college. We had several of us who were all trying entrepreneurial ventures. This was right after the dot-com bubble, but before the word startup was in everyone's vocabulary. And what we were looking around the community, there just simply wasn't an ecosystem or even terms to describe what we were doing, the support that entrepreneurs needed. We were all, most of us were 22 years old, 23 years old, and we were jumping right into it. So we ended up starting an organization called Capital Entrepreneurs, which became sort of the glue for the startup community in Madison. 7 of us would meet on a regular basis, essentially creating a drinking club to talk about how horrible it was to be an entrepreneur. Who are the venture capitalists that you couldn't trust? Who are the lawyers that had no clue what they were talking about, or the accountants that would screw you over? And because we were all going through these growing pains together in a relatively mid-sized community. Eventually, we actually were able to grow that over the course of many years to essentially now have well over 300 members in that organization. But it really did start back about a decade and a half ago.
I think that's just that's comedic as well. So ecosystems and community is so important in the entrepreneurship world. So I almost find that binding together through enemies as well. So I think that's kind of funny that you had to band together with your fellow entrepreneurs. That's an entertaining story.
And the reality is we're all in it together. It's about building networks. It's about building friendships and seeing how that can move an entire community forward.
Absolutely. So then kind of talking about that, what's one thing people don't know about your ecosystem?
So Madison is a great place, a great community. Most folks can identify it as the state capital. The Wisconsin Badgers are pretty popular, but wouldn't necessarily, identify it as a startup ecosystem or hub. But the reality is, sort of two really overarching points. One, when you take it per capita, we are 14th in the world for venture capital dollars invested in our community. So that's per capita. So the average resident sees venture capital as sort of changing the landscape of new and innovative startups that are here in Madison, growing and keeping to the pace of many of the major hubs. The other part about Madison is where we just have a true collective breadth of startups, in many different verticals, that you wouldn't otherwise expect, in everything from SaaS, biotechnology, healthcare startups. So although we may not have, the same nuanced in a single industry, we make up for that in a very wide range of startups, raising serious venture capital dollars and high growth investments.
Interesting. So then if I were to start a business in your community, would I be eligible for any local grants or interest-free loans? Would you know what that atmosphere looks like?
Yeah, so there are a few. The Doyen Group is an organization that's targeting primarily women and underrepresented entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of color that do have grant related programs. We do have quite a bit of free programming in the community, and there are different tax advantages from the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation as a company does grow. So there are really interesting opportunities on that front.
Definitely. So then who has the biggest venture capitalist been that you've worked with?
Oh, myself personally?
Yeah.
Lightspeed or Redpoint? So that's a great question, and I don't want to insult someone over at Insight or somewhere. I don't want to be like, this is one of those where someone will remember me. But fairly, some of the larger funds, Redpoint, Bessemer, Bain comes to mind. And many of these are because they're investing in the community and with startups that are sort of within the family.
Of course. And you have been involved for quite a while. So I'm sure it's kind of tough to pick which one's the biggest.
Yeah, I would have to Google that for you. But, those are relatively large funds. And we are seeing, the reason why we see these companies is they are active in a national portfolio. You are seeing both funds from both coasts saying, how do we get involved in ecosystems, no matter where the startup company is? And I think that's why we have quite a few that are landing here in Madison.
Definitely. So then how did you end up getting connected with them?
So usually you will find that good quality startup ideas, the best investors out there will keep a very large network to try to find the most opportune deal flow. And what ecosystems really can take advantage of is once you see a certain fund that's taken an interest inside one company in your community, it's so much easier to then get them to show up and look at the next investment from that same community. So for example, let's say Greylock is happening to show up in Madison for a meeting or taking a pitch. It is all right. Well, there are three other companies that may have a certain interest, and I think it is that cycle of success. And it's one of the reasons why we see Madison growing on that list of a great place to start a company.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So then kind of keeping on that idea of building a community, making connections and networking, are there any co-working spaces in your area?
Yeah, so we have, that would be a great question post-COVID. But we do have spaces and several of the other larger, obviously for-profit co-working spaces. We have 100 State, Horizon, and Matrix, which are our community co-working spaces and some of the first that were on the market. Synergy is among that group. And we have Starting Block, which is, the place where we call home. Yeah, essentially it's a 50,000 square foot facility that is a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs to be able to find small offices and flexible terms, as well as programming around startup creation.
And then this question, I feel like it's a good question, but I know that it's a little bit dated with COVID, but which coffee shops would you say entrepreneurs hang out in?
There's this great coffee shop called Collectivo, which is right across the street from the state capitol. And at any given point, you can find someone influential in the business community, in technology or state government, all in one spot. Some of our local funds would just simply hang out there. However, I think everyone is spending a little more time at home these days.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, so it's almost like I don't even know how you try and interact with them. Maybe post-COVID would be the best time to get that. Otherwise, if you run into someone on your pickup of your coffee.
Yes, I am looking forward to be returning to coffee shops in the near future.
Absolutely. And since we are Mug News, a little fun question that we also ask is, what's your favorite coffee drink? Do you have a classic order that you get?
So here's the crazy part. I have never had a cup of coffee.
What? Never?
Yeah, never.
That's
I
insane.
tried sips of it, and like I find it revolting. Now my wife and I do average between the two of us like 6 glasses a day. So I'm at 0 and she's at more than 0. So it's not that we aren't doing our part as a household. But yeah, no, I have never had a glass of coffee.
Crazy. How do you have your energy to do everything? Do you have a secret?
I don't. No. I really should probably I think like that what I need to do is get some kind of addictive habit, because that will be like my new thing and I will be able to reach true maximum productivity. But no, I don't have any other secret. I don't drink coffee, very rarely drink alcohol. I guess I'm weird that way.
You know, you could almost like write something or get attention that way with being like, oh, here I am, Scott Resnick, and I can have no coffee and like just maybe owe it to a sleep schedule or something.
Yeah, I also have a 2-year-old, so I can promise you that it's not due to sleep. Yeah, as a recovering politician, I try to stay out of the news in that way. So it will just be folks on this podcast that will learn of that secret. I'm actually surprised that never came out in any one of my political elections, that I don't drink coffee. I'm surprised it didn't.
Wow. I'm just very impressed. It's crazy. Yeah. So then getting to some of the other questions away from caffeine, I suppose, is where would I go to learn more about upcoming events in your startup community?
Startingblock.org is Starting Block Madison. .org is a great place of a sort of a one-stop shop of the activities that are occurring in the Madison region. We also have a bi-weekly newsletter that goes out that highlights collectively all of the events that are going on and keeping folks informed and engaged.
Do you have anything in mind with the question of what's the most successful startup from your community?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Of one, how do you define startup, and then, so and then where do we begin? I mean, essentially every business or corporation at one point was a startup. You would probably look at the Epic Systems as probably being the most notable company that started, an IT healthcare company that started in the 1970s and grew to a multi-billion-dollar company. Post.com, boom, we have had a number of success stories. Exact Sciences and the biotechnology side, which is now a publicly traded company. But companies like Redox, Eat Street, Ionic, companies that have gone on to raise, serious venture dollars and having true impact in the world of the areas of everything from food delivery to mobile development.
Definitely. And you know what? We have another person in the chat room. Looks like Tom Chapman has entered. Hi, Tom. Are you there?
I am. How are you guys?
Doing well.
I thought I'd just drop in and offer my insights into the conversation.
So I was trying to figure out how to assemble the worst NBA franchise, and now you're here. So I figured you would actually have some great tips on how to just really assemble the worst roster.
I was really just hoping to hear how you got arrested. That was really what I was when you were the mayor. That was the one story we mentioned as preparation for this podcast. So my read on the NBA is like everything else. You need to have a systemic approach. And I think folks like the Bucks have a great player, but haven't necessarily figured out how to win in the playoffs. So, that's sort of generally where I come down on that.
Well, I'm glad that you've added your infinite wisdom to this conversation.
Are you going to talk a little bit about, so the real question I have is, you're in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costume, is that correct?
I was not in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costume. That would be, you're widely exaggerating the story.
True question. Yeah, a true interview question. How did you get arrested?
So one, I was not arrested. There is a difference between being detained and arrested. And during Halloween, there was a unfortunately, I was mayor during Halloween. This was back in 2014, and there was a very intoxicated Ninja Turtle. And the turtle was on its back. This is obviously a college student, not a true Ninja Turtle. I wanted to make sure Tom was aware of that difference. And an officer mistakenly detained me as I was the mayor of Madison. So it was an unfortunate turn of events. I hope the Ninja Turtle was okay. I believe it was a Michelangelo. He recovered. It was better than the Johnny Depp who actually was arrested that night. But what I will say is being mayor of Madison during Halloween is quite the adventure.
I was going to say, of any of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to get arrested, it would be Michelangelo.
Yes. And just remember, if you are dressed as a Michelangelo and it is Halloween, try to manage your alcohol consumption.
Wise words.
The real reason I wanted to drop in, Scott, was actually to make sure that you talked a little bit about capital entrepreneurs. Yes. I thought your section in Startup Community Way was really well done, and so I wanted to make sure that came up.
Yeah, that's how I started the interview.
All right. Well,
so that mission was accomplished.
Excellent. I've been here. I'm glad we got to the heart. I did have problems remembering that it was Michelangelo and Caitlin and I's pre-meeting. So that was one of the pieces of information. However, I will admit, I thought you were in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costume and that you were the one that was detained. So that makes me sad that none of that's true. I like the story better, imagining you being arrested in a costume of such variety.
Yeah, no, I was certainly not arrested, detained momentarily.
Were you in a costume?
No, it was like the back and forth. Like, this is my time to shine as being mayor. So, like, do I dress up during this? And I couldn't. I did not dress up during Halloween. If you were to have dressed up, what would you dress up for? I was actually thinking about dressing up as the mayor. He had a Hawaiian shirt outfit that he was, and a mustache, and I was going to go as him. And then I thought it was going to be. Then I backed out at the last minute. Well, now I would have done that in a heartbeat.
Could have done the mayor from The Nightmare Before Christmas. That would have been an option as well.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're like going into the command post and everyone else is taking this seriously. And then you are that time 25, 26-year-old mayor of Madison, Wisconsin, with the phone numbers to call in the National Guard, and you are the only one dressed up. It's like that high school moment where it's like, are all of my friends going to dress up, or am I just going to dress up? And you don't want to be the one kid in high school who dresses up when no one else did. It's fair. Fair. Before I go, I will ask an ecosystem-related question. So I had a conversation today about Wichita, and we were talking favorably about Madison. And so I guess my question would be, what do you think is the special sauce in Madison that has allowed it to grow when other communities similarly situated have not necessarily had the same entrepreneurial ecosystem success? I would say it's the network. It's it's a handful of things, but really it is leveraging those national and international connections that folks build while they are in Madison, and the affinity, and being able to leverage those. Well, cool. I'll let you guys finish your conversation, but I thought I'd drop in and say hi. So hello. Thank you. I'll give you. I'm at the office. I'll give you a call when I'm driving home because I have a Green Bay question for you. Okay. See you later.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for coming, Tom.
See ya.
Well, that was eventful. That was fun.
Yeah. By the way, usually I spend most of my time just harassing Tom about everything under the sun.
Don't worry. I think that's how a couple of our meetings went too. All good things. I promise, all good things. But it was pretty comedic.
I literally took out Facebook ads at a conference he and I were at, just so he could randomly see his face with a poorly attributed quote. when, as I micro-targeted him.
Oh my gosh, I love it. See, you got to have some of that like playful attitude and make sure to keep things light, because you and Tom are very close and like you both have succeeded very well in the entrepreneurship community. And I think that does have something to do with not taking everything so seriously.
Yeah, I mean, that is very true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, great. I do have a couple more questions.
Let's keep on going.
And then, so this one is, if I were to move to your community tomorrow and I wanted to start a business, what should I do first?
That's a great question. I mean, I would say sign up for the Starting Block newsletter, and although this is fairly challenging, it's about meeting people and interacting. We're a fairly small community, all things considered. Mm-hmm. So you're usually only 1 degree of separation from that person that will take you to the next level. And as a community that cares and pays it forward, you will find that Madison is just a great place to start to meet people.
Absolutely. So does Midwest Nice, do you think that plays a part in it?
Certainly, and I think it's part of the ethos inside the community.
So then, do you have any recommendations? Are there any news outlets, podcasts, blogs, anything dedicated to cover startups in your city?
So we do have Wisconsin Inno, we have X Economy. There's a number of programs as well that do try to get into the real-time reporting. And unlike some other communities, our traditional media does cover much of the startup news in Madison, being inside the Cap Times, the State Journal, and the Isthmus. So we usually do, and Madison Magazine. So we usually do have a pretty fair representation of what's going on here.
Definitely. Well, that was my official list of questions that I had for you, but I always like to ask, is there anything that you'd recommend or any parting thoughts that you have, anything you'd say to advice to give to people who are starting?
Yeah, what I will just say is, it's after doing multiple startup ventures, it's about creating grit, it's overcoming adversity, and as I shared in the beginning, it's about building a network of people who you can get through the startup creation and the various phases together. It's very, very difficult to do it alone. I actually would challenge that no one can do it alone, except for very rare entrepreneurs. So it's about leveraging those individuals. I always take a lot of pride of being, I won't say the dumbest person at every single startup that I work with, but it's surrounding yourself with those who can challenge you and really strive to take you to the next level and bring the best out of you. So whether you're doing that in a community, an ecosystem, or at a startup itself, building that grit and building that talent around you is quite critical.
Absolutely. That is an incredible perspective as well as advice regarding the entrepreneurship community. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And then that is all the questions I have for you.
Sounds great. Talk to you later. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and stay healthy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You as well.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from a person who's building it, I'm going to link back up with Nick to clarify on some jargon and take a deeper dive into this ecosystem.
So, Caitlin, how was your interview with Scott?
Hey, Nick, I had a really good interview with Scott. He had a lot to, mention, so I figured I could just kind of give you some things that I took away from it.
Yes, of course. What were they?
Well, sure. So one thing that I think you'll notice that our tech is a little bit unreliable. So in the meeting, we had to cut the video, like as you saw. But I think that's one thing to be said about entrepreneurs. And then just in order to be successful is to be able to bounce back and kind of continue on the interview. We continued to have a really good interview. It was just like without that video aspect. But that's kind of in theater, it's like if something's going to go wrong, it will go wrong. And I think that was kind of an example today.
Of course.
But aside from that, aside from the technical difficulties, I really took to heart that him and Tom's relationship. So they had a bunch of jokes. Tom came on the show, said hi, and I wanted to kind of point out that dynamic was really helpful between entrepreneurs, and that if you can make connections, make friends with the people who are in your community, that you can help each other succeed in the future. That was something like that social aspect of everything like really stood out to me.
Yes, of course. And also just, I guess, a good lesson on the strength of relationships. And like, I guess those are built over a long period of time. And there is a value to a community, to people knowing each other and being friends with one another. Was there anything, Caitlin, that you had to look up after, like any jargon or anything like that?
Actually, Scott mentioned let me see, they were called the Doyen Group, and they are they provide opportunity for women and underrepresented individuals in entrepreneurship. So I kind of checked them out a little bit, and that was something I would never have thought to look up if I hadn't asked Scott and he'd given those recommendations.
Okay, amazing. Anything else, any other major takeaways leaving the interview, or anything else you want to touch on before we read out the episode?
As a fun note, he's from Wisconsin, so that was my graduate, where I graduated. So that was my last fun bit.
Yeah, go Wisconsin, most definitely. So, how much of how good is the cheese in Wisconsin? I've only been to Madison one time, Caitlin, to ask the cliche question.
Oh, there's just so much cheese. You have to go there more than once. There's so much variety.
Okay. I like the answer. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder Podcast, which is a product of Mug.News. It is hosted by Nick Kastner and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, you can connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every Wednesday morning, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a beat.